Good people, welcome to the latest episode of Jonathan Thinks. I'm Jonathan Collins, your friendly neighborhood democracy scholar. I've got a few things on my mind, and maybe, just maybe, you've been thinking about them too. To get things started, the first thing I'm thinking about are these Trump accounts. So Donald Trump has created this program that essentially allows for the establishment of these family accounts that you as parents can create for your kids. It's part of the Working Families Tax Cuts Act that was a part of the, or what's really known as the One Big Beautiful Bill. Right? Great name for a policy there. But it's a part of the One Big Beautiful Bill, and it calls for the creation of these accounts. And what happens is you can create, you get $1,000 contribution from the Treasury Department to start this account, and then every year, parents, guardians, and employers can make up to $5,000 in contributions to the accounts. And so this account, this Trump account, is a way to actually generate, in theory, long-term wealth for the next generation. Like you start this investment early in your kids, and now you look up and suddenly, by the time they're 18, this is a sizable amount of money that can be invested, not just in higher education. So you can use it for college, but you can also use it for kids to buy their first home, invest and start a small business. It can go towards their retirement. There's all kinds of flexibility that's built in here. And then in the requirement too is that for this to be an investment through an investment fund. So like it's not a savings account, it goes into an investment fund that is then going to increase in value over time because the investment funds are approved by the Treasury Department. So they're safe investments that should essentially grow and increase in value over time, value that won't be taxed. And then the contributions that are made by the employer come in pre-tax. So I say all this to say, everything about this sounds really good. And you've already had over 3 million families start accounts for their kids. It kind of sounds amazing. The one issue is the name on the account, Trump accounts. And anything that Trump has touched has turned to an SCAM, scam. Scam. Trump Airlines, scam. Trump University, scam. Trump Steaks, scam. Trump Vodka, scam. Trump Mortgages, GoTrump.com, Trump Magazine, a Trump game, scam. You get a scam. Everybody gets a scam. And so you're supposed to tell me that the scam god has put his name on this plan that is supposed to result in generational wealth being accumulated for families all across the U.S. Color me skeptical. Now look, I think you should do your research on the Trump accounts. I think you should strongly consider maybe potentially making such an investment, but also do so at your own risk. We got to figure out, how is Donald Trump benefiting from this personally? Because everything that Trump has touched, again, I just named a whole slew of scams. Everything he's touched, the purpose has been his own material benefit and gain. It's been exploiting innocent people out of their money. And my fear is that this is just more of the same. But these Trump accounts, they are getting a lot of buzz. They are getting a lot of traction. Again, do your research on this, but hey, be careful. with the Trump accounts. Second thing that I'm thinking about, speaking of being careful, if you were watching the Super Bowl, you saw the commercial for the Ring doorbells. You know the Ring doorbells that have the video cameras that will record footage and save it to your Ring account. And it's caused a big uproar because people saw this commercial and everybody's concerned about one big issue. Because if you saw the commercial, it shows there's a lost puppy, and then they use the Ring cameras footage from all the different neighbors to track down the puppy, and they were able to find the puppy, retrieve the puppy, give the puppy back to the family it belongs to. And it was all because of the beautiful collective action that happens through the lovely technology of the Ring camera. And it's a beautiful story in a white picket fence kind of way, but it raises major questions about surveillance. And so for me, I immediately thought about the Panopticon. And so British philosopher Jeremy Bentham in like the 18th century comes up with this concept of the Panopticon. And essentially it was a prison redesign. And so they put the security tower in the center of the prison, and they circled the prison cells around the cell tower. And what it did was it increases the efficiency through which you can surveil. So now only a few guards are needed to surveil hundreds and hundreds of prisoners, right? We've made surveillance so much easier conceptually, is what this Panopticon does. And I look at the Ring camera, especially in this commercial, and all I can see is this is the digital Panopticon, where now they're making it so easy to surveil our movements walking up and down the street. And it's great if it's breaking case of emergency. There's a murder on the loose. We saw this with the Brown University, my former employer. We saw this with the Brown University murder, where they were using Ring footage to actually trace the steps of the murderer. And that was great. That resulted in solving a major crime. My issue is what happens when this virtual Panopticon, that is all of this Ring camera surveillance, is used to profile and lead to the detaining and the harassment of just everyday black and brown folks who just walk down the street. Because if you've been on Nextdoor, you've seen it. Well, black male in a hoodie walking down the street looking suspicious. With the Ring camera footage opportunity, this is making that profiling way too easy, way more prevalent. And we know all it takes is one bad encounter with law enforcement, especially if you're black, especially if you're brown, for everything in your life to change. So, hey, all I'm saying is Ring camera, I get it, but beware of the digital Panopticon. Speaking of things to beware of, the next thing I'm thinking about is this recent viral moment where Cam Newton is describing relationship dynamics between black women and black men, and he makes the claim that black women lose value by having kids before being married. That black women who go on, especially to have 3 and 4 and 5 kids before getting married, they become less valuable in the eyes of men who may pursue them. And I want to warn us against, this kind of message, not only because of its toxicity, but because I think it's a very bad misuse of something that I think was happening in a very productive way in the black community, especially in the black public sphere. And right, so I felt like we have been entering this moment of kind of cultural postmodernity. And what does that mean? So I think, modernity is all about coming together and figuring out, all right, how do we define something? What's the absolute truth? What is especially within the terms of blackness, what is blackness? What does it mean to be black? I think the Harlem Renaissance was the best example of black folks coming together across differences, fragmented stories and backgrounds, picking up the pieces of what we were dealt with slavery, and coming together and saying, this is how we will redefine blackness and in all of its beauty and glory. But then ever since, we've understood that blackness has been socially constructed, and we've been looking to deconstruct that and unpack it. And we've allowed blackness to exist in a multiplicity of ways. However, most recently, we've taken it to the extent to which we are now championing, aspects of blackness that I think we should be more cautious around. And in this instance, is championing the idea of the black male who can assign value to black women based on these antiquated notions of how they date and how they rear a child. And yes, we should be deconstructing what it means to be a black man. And we should therefore also be allowed for black men to hold expectations and also see themselves as valuable. But we cannot do so at the expense of black women. And this Cam Newton situation, it just feels like postmodernism gone horribly wrong. So I hope we can find the middle ground. Learn to love each other, but understand that the important part is community, is village, is child raising, and not thinking about it as something that makes us valuable, but as something that makes it important for the development of our children. This is so much bigger than us, folks. This is about our kids. And so hopefully Cam Newton can reach a level of maturity and realize that. Speaking of people who need to realize things, Stephen A. Smith is inching closer and closer to a run for the presidency. And I just have one question. Actually, it's a question that I've had about Stephen A. Smith for a very long time, which is, who are the Stephen A. Smith fans? Who are the people who really want to see this happen? Who are the people that demand to see Stephen A. Smith on a TV screen? Who are the people that really ride for Stephen A. Smith and are like, yeah, Stephen A. Smith, that's my boy, that's my dog, that's my man? Who are these people? Because look, I'm an avid sports fan. I watch a lot of sports, especially basketball, football, NBA, NFL, baseball. I love sports. So I've been seeing Stephen A. Smith on TV for years. And I don't have a problem with Stephen A. Smith existing. It's totally fine. I respect his bravado that he shows on television. It's great. It's entertaining, sure. The issue becomes when you step into politics, right? Now you're talking about representing the interests of people, of businesses, and you're talking about bigger ideas about policy and governance. And I'm just like, who called for you, dog? Who sent for you? Who asked for you to step up and do this? Who are your people? Who's behind you? Who wants to see this happen? Because I've never met anybody in my life who thinks that Stephen A. is even an elite broadcaster in that way. Legitimately, I'm a fan of his. I've met a lot of people who know I know who Stephen A. Smith is, but not a lot of people that actually stand behind him and will really fight for him and be like Stephen A. Smith hive. And what that tells me is that Stephen A. Smith is all clout. And we got to move past this era where we're just hopping on trains of people and giving platforms and opportunity and making space for people just because they have clout, just because they have followers, just because they're recognizable, just because we know their names. Because that's all the currency that Stephen A. Smith seems to have. He's a country without countrymen. He is a general without an army. And now he's taking that same energy into a presidential run. I can't. We got to stop. But speaking of presidential runs, it's a great moment to stop and pay homage to a man who led one of the greatest presidential runs in the history of American politics. And that would be our recently dearly departed brother, Reverend Jesse Jackson. Now, the presidential runs I speak of are 1984 and in 1988, where Reverend Jackson sought the Democratic nomination for the Democratic Party. Now, this was the biggest at the time presidential bid by an African American ever in American history. We went from slaves and descendants of slaves not even having formal voting rights to now potentially seeing a black man be the nominee for a major political party. This was huge. And this made Jesse Jackson an icon. He was a star. But I think what we should be remembering Jesse Jackson for is his ability to be what I look at him as possibly the greatest op in the history of Black America. He is Black America's resident op who shows up in front of other people's faces and demands that we as a community be treated better. And he's been willing to clash with whoever he needs to clash with to make this happen. Whether it was when he was with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and after the assassination of Martin Luther King, he clashed with Reverend Ralph Abernathy over the direction that the movement should take. You know, Dr. King, when he was assassinated, he was in Memphis fighting for workers' rights. And Jesse Jackson wanted the movement to transition more into economic equality and fighting for workers and building a multiracial coalition that was centered on anti-poverty and advancing the working class. So he was willing to stand up to his elders. He was willing to be the op if it meant moving us forward into this more economically focused agenda. You look at whether it was him going abroad and negotiating with foreign dignitaries over the release of Americans who are held captive overseas. He was willing to stand up and be the op who negotiated the release. And even in his most controversial modern moment, when he said that thing about President Obama, I won't say it, you can look it up, but you know, he makes this comment about Barack Obama, which he apologized for. But even in making the comment, he said he felt like Barack Obama was talking down to black people. And then after winning the presidency, Barack Obama shows up at this place, my alma mater, and gives a speech where he is widely accused of talking down to black people. And you just look up and here's Jesse Jackson at every turn, willing to be the op, willing to fight, willing to push the ideas forward that advanced not just black equality, but a vision of black equality that was rooted in economic advancement. Was he flawed? Absolutely. Was he imperfect? Certainly. He'll be the first to tell you. But this black boy from South Carolina, who's the product of out of wedlock conception between an 18-year-old girl and a 33-year-old neighbor, who grows up poor and made fun of and picked on, who goes to college and is told he's not good enough to be a black quarterback and becomes one anyway, who becomes the young protege of Martin Luther King Jr., who goes to Chicago and leads an economic movement. This man stands up in front of the world and also changes the nature of American politics by winning states in a Democratic primary that we had never seen a black candidate win before. And so I'm here to celebrate and commemorate Jesse Jackson. I'm proud of his accomplishments. There's been a lot of people floating around this idea that it was Jesse Jackson's run that created the conditions for Barack Obama to run in 2008. That was true, and people have been pointing to the rule changes in the primaries as a main reason why Jesse Jackson was the contributor. And I don't think that's actually true. If you look at it more closely, the only reason Jesse Jackson didn't perform the way that Barack Obama performed in 2008 was because in 1988, when Jesse Jackson runs, he's also running against Al Gore. He's running against the caucus and Al Gore is winning all these southern states. that Barack Obama is able to win in 2008 because he is only running against Hillary Clinton, who is not getting that same level of voter support in the South. So I say all that to say, Jesse Jackson, you are an icon. Thank you for everything that you've done for Black America. And we are glad that we had you on our side as our op. Well, good people, that concludes today's episode of Jonathan Thinks. Again, I'm Jonathan Collins, your friendly neighborhood democracy scholar. Thank you to our producer, Mo, who's working behind the scenes. Remember that every time we convene, it's an opportunity to grow. We do it with love, we do it with joy, and we do it together. These were a few of my thoughts. And who knows, maybe, just maybe, you were thinking about it too. Peace.